Hey Jordan, thanks very much for joining us. If you could start by giving us a brief introduction of yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Levy. I am a founder and CEO of a company called Capsource. We've been around since fall of 2017 was our first pilot with our first customers, and been supporting industry collaboration for higher education for the past 8 years. So really excited to be growing our relationships with schools and impacting students in a way that really helps them accelerate their careers, understand the type of work they want to do, the type of job roles, the type of industries, and really trying to innovate the way that institutions and educators approach career preparation and skills development in the higher ed environment.
And what was it that made you start the business?
Um, you know, I- I've always kind of felt that higher ed was a good option for me, and I was excited to go. And and it's kind of like the rite of passage for business leaders. And I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do, but I thought I would figure it out in higher ed. And I realized that higher ed did a really good job at providing structure and kind of simulating the need for um, accomplishing deadlines, overcoming challenges, working as a team. Like, it's a really cool environment to help learn some of those skills, but it really doesn't focus on helping you really understand the world, the business world, the world of occupations, careers, and professional development in a way that I think really makes a big difference um, in student decision making as they prepare to enter the workforce. So ultimately, um, that's what I wanted to kind of bring to the market, was a way that schools, faculty can take more intentionally implement programming that's designed for student career success and student career exploration.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Definitely schools do prepare you theoretically, but there's definitely a lack of real world preparation. So I can attest to that. That was definitely my experience at school. And how was your experience at school? How was your educational experience?
You know, I I um I didn't miss a class the whole time I was there. I took very seriously participating in class, so I was a good student. And you know, generally, I thought that would have been enough. It was enough to earn myself a high paying job. So I was excited that but that outcome was available to me because I tried hard. The challenge was is that that job wasn't a good fit for me, and I kind of took it because I thought that was the right route forward based on my previous choices. And really, then I started deconstructing kind of how I got to the situation. I realized that there wasn't really a lot. The big four accounting firms recruited very heavily from my university. A lot of students went there. A lot of top performing students went there. So I just said, okay, I'm going to follow the herd. Um, it definitely accomplishes a goal for a school like Lehigh to be able to pump students into those firms. So my wife went to Lehigh too. She started at EY right after she graduated, and she's still there. And obviously, that was the right path for her. And I think that Lehigh served her well in that capacity. But the other side of the coin is, if she had more programming that exposed her to nonprofit leadership, that exposed her to um, uh, corporate social responsibility much earlier on in her academic career, how much had she have chosen her career differently, and her pathway differently? And I think that's really for me where I was kind of excited to innovate on the space. It's not, it's a deceptively uninnovative space, actually. And it kind of surprised me over the years learning more about the resistance to change, because truly, if education is done correctly, it's cutting edge. It's the hub of innovation and research and knowledge, which comes way ahead of industry. And it feels like, because of the free market in the US, that industry is 20 steps ahead and education is just trying to keep up. And every year they get further and further behind. And big trend right now is how is AI, knocking on the door of institutions, and I've seen, leaders in institutions that I respect say to their, staff, if you're worried about AI, just have them submit something on paper with paper and pen. And I that to me like signals the most. It's like a reverse innovation solution. Like let's go back, and the only people who decide let's go back are people who are definitely not innovative and definitely not thinking at the forefront of their industry. And I don't think the resolution should ever be go back. I think it should be how do we go forward in a way that's really intentional, that's going to result in better learning outcomes for students, better experiences for faculty, work-life balance, as a place to work, a place that they enjoy being. So that's what I hope that our product can make an impact on the field in that way, because I was laughing. I was with a mentor the other day saying, you guys have been asking for auto grading for decades. Now you have it, and what you realize is that by you introducing auto grading as a desire, auto assignment solutioning for students is also part of, like, of course, right? If you can grade something, you could generate something. And like, of course they didn't think of that. And it's like, that's fine. I don't think anyone knew that LLMs and some of the conversational AIs would be as powerful as they are. But this is kind of where we're at now is, okay, if this is the way it is, how do we make assignments so that students can use these tools so that they can practice that skill, but it's not going to give them the overall solution, and they're held to the same standard as they are in the professional work environment.
Yeah, with every time a new technology comes out, it always causes a lot of fear, and it sounds like that's what's happening in the education industry for sure. If you were a teacher and there was children have got the opportunities to use LLMs to essentially hack the system and complete exams themselves, like how would you see it planning out where students can work with AI to students and teachers can work with AI together to build solutions rather than to use it as a threat to the system?
It helps to recall like some much more simple historical examples of this type of innovation, right? So, the pocket calculator really didn't become common in schools until the 70s and 80s. By the 90s, students were essentially expected to obviously understand the core mathematics underneath, but if you knew how to use a calculator and you could verify that the answer was correct, the expectation was that you knew math. So it's the same concept with AI. So, for example, we use examination, kind of multiple choice uh, format for assessing student knowledge. The truth of the matter is that that form of assessment is so infrequently used in the real world that it just seems like a ridiculous assessment to even be using to evaluate student knowledge and learning effectiveness. Like, why does it matter right now how much you can recall about the Pythagorean theorem or about the history of the United States from the caverns of your brain? When really I mean, they literally, they used to say, even when I was a kid, which I was, in elementary school in the 90s and early 2000s, well, you're never going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time. Then literally 10 years later, it's like, oh crap, we actually do have a calculator in our pocket all the time. Now we have a calculator and Google and a large language model to get us any answer we need. So what we need to be teaching students is how to use those tools, just like we taught them how to use calculators. So someone made the argument, well, isn't original thought gone if they're creating all the information for you? And I said, if you can't understand what the thing is creating and modify it so it matches your style and your goals, then you never understood what it is to begin with, and you're not going to get very far, right? Same thing with a calculator. You could take a picture of a math problem, have it solve the math problem. But if you don't understand what the math problem, how it's solving the math problem, then you obviously don't know the math. So the key is to use this as a personalized tutor, right? Is to encourage students to learn by engaging in this tool in a way that is productive for their learning. Not to because if you give them a homework assignment where the answer is to write the solution, then there is no way to ensure to develop assurance of learning, because they can get the answer without the not having the knowledge. So that's the key: is creating assessments, creating courses, creating new versions of disciplines that take into account the new prowess of technology that they're graduating and have access into. They're graduating into and have access to upon starting their career, or really even starting college, or really even starting high school. Right? It's like when you're thinking about transitioning someone from elementary school to middle school and high school, what tools do they need to be aware of? Like we were doing the basics of like typing, right? Like I think that's so important. Need to make that earlier, right? Students need to learn how to use computers earlier. Um, Students need to be exposed to Google and large language models earlier. They need to figure out how to verify sources and make sure that they're not clicking on something that they shouldn't. Like they need to learn these things because those are the important skills that are going to lead them into the future. And they're if we're glued to these tools, whatever, 7 to 10 hours a day, it's only going to get worse by the time that they're in their careers. And it's a watch and a phone and eyeglasses and AirPods and and your car, and all these tools are everywhere, right? You're going to be able to ask Siri and it will pull ChatGPT, and it's like, if that's the way it's working and you don't understand the core of how to function with the tool, then you're going to be left behind. And I think that's what education needs to focus on. Is every discipline needs to move just one iteration into the future by using the tools of today to make education more exciting, while also demonstrating how to use the tools so that it's not answering for you, but it's helping you as a personalized tutor learn more about how to solve these types of problems and check that they're accurate, because obviously everyone makes mistakes, including computers. So I think that's another way to kind of deconstruct. It's like, okay, look at that math problem, look at the solution given to you by the internet, come up with another way to get that same solution, right? Now you're asking people to reverse engineer what AI is creating. So there's tools and techniques to like really engage students in a way that is going to prove that they understand these things, the same way that we were able to prove that we understood something by putting it correctly into a calculator.
Certainly, it seems that teachers, students, and everyone have got to work with these tools, understand how they work, etc., to be able to get the best results. But isn't the issue in a way that every time we've had technological innovations, they seemed rather prolific, but AI seems as if it's going to be 10 times prolific, whereas in the past a calculator could solve maths problems. It seems within the next 5 to 10 years that large language models could potentially solve everything. So everything would become redundant except large language models. I think that's what the fear is here from everyone, is like, how strong do these become and what's going to happen?
I mean, automation is around every nook and cranny, right? So even producing widgets, um, extracting. I mean, there are caterpillar mines that don't use any people anymore. Take humans out of harm's way. That's kind of the nature of the beast. Is and there's also I know Chipotle um, just came out with their bot that makes guacamole, and that was successful. And now they're introducing a bot to do more of the serving at Chipotle. There's like 8 to 10 staff members that were standing there, serving bowls. So, at the end of the day, I do think that um, digitization, automation, and tooling is going to disrupt workflows through and through and through, I still think that humanity strives to be productive. And so I think that instead of focusing on delivering for today, I think it's like we'll be able to focus as as a larger community on innovating for tomorrow, right? So yeah, maybe the capability of individuals who end up in positions that are being automated are not set to do that, but you know, I think that it's highly possible that they can add value to those processes. We just need to figure out, how. And I think that because there's an innate desire of humans to work and to innovate, I mean, obviously, not, I mean, I think we could work a lot less hard. I think that even the UK, is trying 4-day work weeks, and there's definitely a possibility to just give people more work-life balance. I often talk about with friends, between the 70s, like early 70s and the year 2000, our entire workforce doubled because women entered the workforce. So, but like people worked just as hard. So literally we just doubled our, capability as a workforce without thinking about like, hey, is this what's best for ourselves and our families? And I think finally we're getting to a point where we're able to start thinking about AI as a tool to enhance our work-life balance, our family life, um, while also being as productive for organizations. At least as productive, because like, one of the other things I've noticed as I've grown a business is like as you take on more people and like your ship gets larger, you can't move as fast, right? Like, and that's the nature of like these large bureaucratic organizations, is that because they've created bureaucracy, um, I just don't think that they can move as fast. They have so much permissioning and acceptance required to really make anything truly possible. So I think that that's where automation is going to fill in, and then we can broaden the amount of people that have access to those types of roles and experiences in the workplace.
And just taking you back to when you started your business, what was it that made you like the catalyst for starting it? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs have ideas how they want to change things, but it's often difficult to, take the plunge. What was it that made you take the plunge?
I was pleasantly surprised how much companies want to work with students. We call it next gen talent, right? But the idea is, so one of my famous stats is it's like 95% of Fortune 500 companies turn over every 50 years. So the real question, I mean, like that's not just a mom and pop shop. That is like, the most powerhouse companies of the economy in the United States. How are they fit? From 1970 to 2020, 95% of them were gone. So so now you're like, okay, what's happening underneath that all? And part of it's bureaucracy getting too big. Part of it is not keeping up with innovation. Um, I think the core of it is not engaging the next generation in a meaningful way to progress the business forward. Because you can survive year over year by making small adjustments and staying slightly ahead of the curve. But like even look at Apple, like the innovations that they're coming out with compared to the innovations that they were coming out with when they were originally founded and creating their first products in the 80s and 90s. That I mean, we are leaps and bounds behind the innovation quotient. And like truly, I mean, the amazing thing, I mean, they spent $100 billion on researching, trying to create a car and ditch that whole idea, all because CarPlay was so successful, And then they spent, I can't believe that they weren't the first ones to say, hey, Siri is the first LLM. Like that to me is shocking, right? Like that was the biggest opportunity for them to be ahead of the market. They have all the data, they had all the best engineers. It's about keeping innovation at the forefront. And the only way to do that is to talk to next gen talent. There's a new documentary on Netflix about I think it's called like The Future of. It features Bill Gates, and it's all basically the future of these different verticals, mostly that are global challenges. So pandemic and global health, climate change, and the whole thing, that his framework that he uses to evaluate the um, the environment, whatever the environment is. Obviously, I'll use climate change particularly as an example. Is he works with the most innovative next gen organizations that are researching how to make better concrete with less emissions, better transportation systems, better alternative energy sources, trying to understand the research and innovation, trying to support that by helping them with their achieve their next milestone of validating, scaling, distributing, to a point where it can reach the global economy, and then engaging next gen talent in discussion about getting involved with that and what's really realistic, right? And I think that in every episode he's sitting down with um, you know a, a room of activists, which are basically students that are really motivated to make a change in the world. And I think that's pretty cool, right? Like one of the most successful business um, leaders in the world spends time around students just to see what bubbles up for them, and then he uses that to I mean, where I would do slightly different than this approach is you take the students to these sites of innovation, and you get them in, because that's what he was saying, that's what he says in a lot of the scenes. He's like, you know it's one thing to be an activist and to highlight what you want changed, but it's another to be a part of the change. And being an activist, really, to me, is more about, you want to be more knowledgeable so that you can ensure that this change is going to happen, and you're advocating for change based on proof of concept that you're seeing. So climate change is really complicated, right? It's an international, global phenomenon. We need cooperation from, we can't even get cooperation to have peace in the world. How are we going to get cooperation to keep the temperature down, right? Like, that's an incredibly difficult challenge for the world. And being upset about that, maybe that's just the first step, but it shouldn't be the only step that activists are taking. You got to go the next mile. So what of these areas that need innovation, which one do I care about? That's what I think, like, education needs to be about, is identifying what students care about, what causes, what verticals, what industries, where their passions are, then taking that and running with it to organizations that need that help, that need that accelerant. And I think that's the part of the loop that, because higher ed is so far behind industry, the way that they interface with each other is so high level. Even our stuff, which is, students get to work on projects with leaders of organizations. So it's not an internship where you're at the bottom of the totem pole. You're working on, Caterpillar asked MBA students from Notre Dame do a master class on battery minerals and functions, and then research what our supply chain would need to look like to turn our entire mining division fleet of vehicles, these machines that are the size of corporate buildings. How do you turn that entire fleet into electric by 2050, right? That's something that students can get jazzed about. It's the case study that's available right now on our site. Anybody can do it. Anybody can work on it and learn about batteries, learn about their supply chain, learn about the requirements of these machining devices, and really start to think about how they want to make a difference, if they want to make a difference in that space. And maybe they realize they don't want to, but that's just as valuable learning as learning that you do want to. Because hopefully, as you're pinging against different, challenges, different verticals, with different leaders that motivate you, you find something that you are excited by. And I think that, to me, so, like, when we talk about, like, automation is going to take people's jobs. I think the key problem is that they chose those jobs in the first place because they were available and convenient, not because they were motivated to take them anyways. So how about we motivate these people, we excite these people to do good for their communities, do good for corporations that are mindful of the impact that they're making in the world and are trying to make a positive impact both on the world and their customers. And you keep rooting for those businesses, you keep staffing those businesses, you keep helping people take that brand with them throughout their career. I think that's the change that needs to happen in order for there to be a future with all this AI automation technology.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying about like the difference between the older generation, the younger generation, and the disconnect between the two. And I think that's definitely what causes a lot of companies to probably stop innovating, maybe because they've got older people on the boards. At the end of the day, it seems like there's not enough access to young people, like you say, and I do wonder how can we solve that, like, because obviously you've got people who are young, say 18, 19-year olds, they all know a lot about upcoming trends, they all know TikTok. That's a lot of things that older people won't know. But looking at it from a business perspective, like younger people, they always start at the bottom of the pile, like you say, they start as interns, and by the time they've worked up, they're old and their experience has changed. It's like, how do we bridge that gap between like old CEOs and young people from the workforce and not put them like that vertically, but put them horizontally so they can work together to innovate?
It's I think I got a lot of pushback in the very beginning of my career because they're saying all these millennials, they want to meet the CEO, they want to be in the C-suite. And I think part of it is because social media made everyone accessible to us. So it's not unrealistic, if you are persistent, to get in touch with someone that you want to talk to. It's not unrealistic, whether it's a professional athlete or a celebrity CEO or just a badass CEO or someone that you want to mentor you. And so I think millennials entered the workplace saying, um, I can be as productive as they'll let me, and I can make as much of an impact as they'll empower me to do so. And I think the most innovative organizations are ones that leverage that excitement. Obviously, a lot of people have spent a lot of their careers built like working, staying in line to get to where they are. And you can't discredit that, and you have to reward that. But you also need to reward innovation if you want to stick around anyway. So I think it's just creating an environment where there is intergenerational collaboration. It's something in general, I believe that, we host events all the time in our house for our community. And like one of the most important things to me is that it's not just children and parents. It's not just parents in their 30s. It's everybody. It's grandparents. It's friends of our older, the older siblings or the older cousins that have their group of friends that's 10, 15 years older, and their kids are older and they're going through different things. So I just think that if you create an intergenerational environment, you all learn from each other, you share resources. It's creating a community, a shared community, and it doesn't even need to be formal. It's intentionally informal within the social setting, but it's a perfect example of like, okay, when you add some formality to that within a corporate environment, how much value everyone can get, right? The young guns who have the most energy, like I'm on some boards of down in Arizona since I just moved down here. And I think our approach is, the government can't do it as well as individual actors, nonprofits, and communities, so let them figure it out. And honestly, it's very different than living in New York, where I was previously, where basically the layers of federal, state, city, local governments like really take responsibility over everything. And I think in some parts it's really exciting because we get to decide what we care about. We get to activate ourselves and get energized by things that are going to be something we want to work on and make an impact on, and not something that someone just got assigned to, that hopefully will take it seriously. So I think the key is helping people find what they're passionate about, and encouraging intergenerational connectedness. And really, it comes down to collaborating in intergenerational groups, um, communicating in intergenerational methods, asynchronously, doing as much of that, recording, um, screenshots, just uh, asynchronous, like Slack, Microsoft Teams stuff, Google Docs, like things where people don't need to be working in the room together, but still get the value of working together. And I think that's like the solutioning. And millennials felt that way. Gen Z feels more that way, and you'll guarantee that that trend is only going to get more serious. Flattening of organizations, incorporating intergenerational work groups into um, solutions. I think there's just it applies to any environment where it's like big four consulting companies, innovation teams at CPG companies. You need everyone in the room. You need the people who have shipped 1 million and the people who haven't shipped one, and together you come up with new ideas. But if you isolate a room where it's just the people who had the rite of passage to get there, you're going to end up like 95% of the Fortune 500 companies.
And you touched on helping people find their passions. Do you think it's good advice when people are told to follow their passion?
I mean, it has to be good advice, because at the end of the day, like, to get more existential, like, what are we even doing here? I mean, it's not to go to the same job every day and be bored, frustrated, discouraged. It's to live life, feel fulfilled. I mean, I just learned yesterday at a board training thing that there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs at work. It's worth checking out if anyone is interested in seeing, like, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, your physical well-being matters more to employees before you can get them to a point of like this level of productivity where they're motivated, um, they are excited, they are feeling connected. So there's all sorts of different components to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that apply to workplace culture. So I think following passion really comes down to you, like remaining motivated, feeling motivated, um, and it has to, you have to make it work. Like, you can't just like endlessly um, tread water in something you're passionate about. So you got to figure out how to make sparks fly. And like, I think that's where entrepreneurial thinking, like, if you're going to follow your passion, you need to think like an entrepreneur. You don't need to be an entrepreneur. You need to have entrepreneurial thinking. And that just is, how do I make sparks fly by making connections between what I love and what I'm passionate about and what the world needs. Actually, there's a great framework, come to think of it, that kind of talks about this, called Ikigai. And it's basically, the framework of maximizing like what skills I have, what the world needs, what can I get paid for. Um, I think there's one more, but um, let me just quickly recall all the quadrants. But it's um, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs, and what you love. So it's actually interesting how what you're good at and what you love are different. And then what you love and what you're good at are different than what you could be paid for. And then all three of those are different than what the world needs, right? And so I think it's kind of, when you say follow your passion, it needs to take into account the four of those key motives, because if you dump all your life into a passion that is not something you could be paid for, then you sure as hell should know that before you follow your passion. And like a perfect example of this is like people who dedicate their life to religion. Like, there's very few careers in religion, right? Like, you could be a religious leader, You could be support, like community support, outreach support, for religious organizations. But you need to go in with your eyes wide open, just like the college scorecard that President Obama mandated, that we've now finally got 16 years later, a very good reporting structure for, hey, if you're going to go to this college, here's the generalized average of the financial outcomes for them. Here's how much they paid. Here's how much debt they had. Here's how much they're earning. If you can drill down into individual majors. So like nursing at this college leaves you with this much debt and this much earning potential. So I think playing with those types of tools as you're exploring in your career is key, and kind of continuing to do that, and level setting. And sometimes what you realize is that if you are passionate about something, but it's not something you could be paid for, it's probably better that you spend time, like that side hustle time, now freeing, because we have so much AI out there doing half of our work for us. Go do something you're passionate about. So I'm working with nonprofits in Tucson. I'm working in the Jewish community in Tucson because I have the time to do that. And that's stuff that fills other parts of my passion that isn't necessarily stuff that I'm dedicated and getting paid for.
Yeah, there's multiple ways of following your passion. Maybe if you, like you say, if you're working, you could be working in a job like accounting, but then you can do non-profit work outside, and that's a good way of finding a way of getting paid for something that you're good at, but then also following your passion. So I agree, and I can attest to what you said about religion. I actually graduated in religion, and it's incredibly hard to find a job in the religion and philosophy space for sure. So it's like it is definitely the ikigai, finding something that meets all the quadrants and trying to hit the sweet spot, so to speak. And you mentioned on entrepreneurial thinking. I totally agree with that. I think it's definitely something that is required in all sort of aspects of life, especially in organizations. And where do you think you've got your entrepreneurial thinking from?
So I think that, so I'll tell you where it came from. In my community, in my household, like inquiry was always um, accepted and rewarded. I think in the education space it is too, right? When you have questions, it indicates you're paying attention. When you have good questions, it helps move the conversation in a new and interesting direction. So I think my entrepreneurial spirit comes from continuing to ask why, just like a kid. And like it gets difficult when I have a one little child right now, and she's still pretty asking why. And I understand that it can be fatiguing to have kids continue to ask, but why, but why, but why. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that entrepreneurships continue to ask, but why, all the time, until they break some part of a system where they can insert some sort of effectiveness and or efficiency that creates a whole new world. Maybe not for the world, but for the world of the target audience that they're looking to engage with and impact.
Certainly. And in schools, sometimes, like when you learn, it's not necessarily about the why. Like you just learn for exams, and that's the answer. And there's a set answer. There's no why. So I do wonder if maybe the way things are taught in school and the lack of the lack of encouragement for the question and the why can sometimes lead to the lack of creation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think in the U.S., like there's we revere entrepreneurs and builders. So I think that there's always this kind of like aspiration
Mhm.
to become one, because they're not for everyone, but I think like there's also opportunities for people to do like small businesses and do a side hustle and kind of own something of their own. And like I think that kind of free spirit is really powerful in the US. And I've done some work with like students immigrate students visiting from Greece, and we basically had an entrepreneurship panel, and we were like, okay, show of hands, how many students want to be an entrepreneur? Not a single one of the 30 graduate students rose their hand. Like, whoa, let's dive. We stopped and said, this is an opportunity to talk, rather than them listening. Why don't you guys share why not? And then we'll tell you what motivates us. And hopefully that will motivate you to go back to Greece and say, I can do this, just like they can do this. Obviously, there's some limits, with the government setup, the business environment that makes certain things much more difficult. But I think that the drive, I think drive is there. It's just about whether or not people feel like they can make it to the next level, make it to the next step. And that's the really tough part about entrepreneurship, is like it's fatiguing. Like you're on a constant disappointment circuit, because in order to survive, you need to work your ass off. And then in order to thrive, you need to get lucky. And then when that's not happening, either because of internal or external forces, it's fatiguing. And you just got to keep getting up, brushing yourself off, and powering forward, which it's not for everyone. But, at the end of the day, there's a great leader behind every single initiative that's happening that people work at it ultimately anyway. So you got to focus on your leadership skills. I think so. One of the things that came up when you were explaining, like, I guess that's just the model of education, is that really very early education, you cannot get the kids to sit down for that long. So it is very experiential, right? Like they're doing activities, they're cutting things out, they're pacing things, they're doing collaborative projects, they're making exhibitions, for the hallway. They're just literally getting through the day. I mean, like my daughter's in daycare, she plays all day. That's like the education is play based. So we go from play based to highly experiential to sit in rows and listen. And the reason for that, frankly, is because it's much easier for one adult to manage 12 to 25 kids if they're sitting in rows. There's no doubt that that is the reason why, right? So then, okay, they're sitting in rows. How do you create curriculum that you can deliver to them and assess them on in rows? It makes sense why we got to where we are with, standardization of exams, content-based education. I know everything, you know nothing. You need to listen to me. You need to show me that you're listening. Um, and I think that when you think about the experiential classroom, one that involves industry, student collaboration, project-based learning, it's a somewhere between early childhood and pre-K for adults, right? They are all off in working on different things. They're having different challenges, different hardships, and like your role as an educator is to be a facilitator. And I think that's the last point I'll make on this, is that I came to this like realization yesterday that, that famous saying, like, in order to really get things done, you have to like help people think that that idea is theirs, right? So like, it's like, don't tell people what to do, help them realize that that's what they should be doing.
Nudge theory.
And it's such a different approach. And I realized yesterday that that's the difference between traditional teaching and traditional leadership. Let me tell you what to do, versus facilitating a discussion, an innovation exercise, uh, um, to get to an aha moment. And I think it can only happen when people are actively participating, because one of the things that happens, when you're talking content and then you say, um, does anybody have any questions? What they think about is the content. But when you're doing a facilitation and you say, we're talking about, these are strategies to get through board meetings more effectively, these are strategies to build a better board. Then you say, does anybody have any questions, right? How does anybody want to share if they, when they use something like this, how it went? Now you're getting them to think about applying what you're talking about to their life, to their experience. That's facilitation. And I think that's like active learning is just, you might be sitting, but at least you are thinking about how it applies to your life. And if education is so far out of your life, it's very hard for it to be applicable. Like even think, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the field of history, it's an important field to continue to archive and understand the archive of history and use history to understand our future. Um, but it's not a field that's easy to get paid for. And the reason why is because looking into the past is not necessarily the best way to pave a path for the future. It definitely helps, but people are generally interested in paving a path to the future, a better path, a smoother path, a more exciting path, and a more exciting place. And I think that's what, motivating students, motivating learners, facilitating environments is all about getting people on board with your path, feeling better about their path, getting more excited about their path. And I think that's the special nature of this type of learning approach, which I just wish there were more. I just wish there were more educators and more environments that would lend itself to this. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are in charge of the learning. And if learning is still, hey, build a marketing plan for this fictitious company, like you could do that in 2 seconds on ChatGPT, and it's like you need more interactivity, you need more real world scenario understanding, you need more of wait, so what other things are at play here? And I think that that's where you start to really learn your skill set and what you're capable of.
Totally. And just before we finish up, what's the best piece of advice you've been given or seen?
So I get asked this on like interviews all the time, so I have like my standard answer. So frankly, I don't have like a good name for this model yet, but I think one of the things that I believe so strongly, and it actually is very tied to the intergenerational thing I talked about earlier. Intergenerational gatherings are only possible if you are willing to be mentored, to find good mentors, to surround yourself by people that you want to learn from, and include in the room people that are motivated and excited to learn from you. And you keep doing that. And honestly, age should not define the role in mentoring. That's another thing that I think is really key. Like, if your mentors are not trying to learn as much from you as you are from them, then they're not really a good mentor for you. Because the truth of the matter is that you should complement each other and learn from each other. And so I think that the whole thing is you should always have your mentors and you should always have your mentees. And that's what's going to keep you like back to that same concept of like Fortune 500s churning every 50 years. At the core of that, there's a lack of mentors learning from mentees, aspiring to be mentored by, the more senior, like that needs to work really well. And reaching back into the pool of mentees, learning from them and mentoring them. And if you're not doing both, it doesn't have to be formal. Capsource is trying to provide a structure for more formal mentoring programs. It's one of our products. And it's a really hard nut to crack, because at the end of the day, one of the things I've learned from talking to other people who have designed mentoring programs is that often they fail before they get started because A, there's not an authentic connection between the mentor and mentee, and B, they don't know what to talk about. And that's a really tough thing to solve for. So we try using like, curriculum, guiding questions, that type of thing to like really motivate students to show up and get mentored, and then motivate mentors to like ask good questions of mentees so that they can move the needle forward in some meaningful way. But I think that at the end of the day, even without some formal approach, you really need to think about, who am I learning from? My peers, my mentors, my mentees, and then who am I trying to move up a notch? And be patient with those people and keep them around, because you have to remember there's so much you learn from them as you're mentoring them, because where they have deficit, the reason why you're mentoring them is because they have value somewhere else and you saw that value. And so I think that's the key, is feeling that connection, reminding yourself of that connection, and pursuing that kind of mentor, like a lifelong learner mindset. Because we don't go back to school, most of us, right? After we graduate, we're done. So how are you going to keep learning? It's got to be from people and machines. And at the end of the day, one of my favorite things is to show, some of my mentors how to use AI. A lot of them just don't even try, you know? And so like even my CFO like does not use ChatGPT at all. And I was like, just give me a question to ask it and we'll do it together. Like don't be scared of this tool. Like it's really not that complicated. So I hope that helps and it motivates people to think about themselves as um, a connector, a learner, um, a mentee and a mentor, someone who can find new motivation, get passionate about something, understand that whatever they're passionate about might not only, it might lead to some type of personal satisfaction, but it might not be a career. And that's okay too. And you should still do it. But at the end of the day, you have to think about the full picture of Ikigai if you want to feel that fulfillment. And I think we talked about quite a bit of different frameworks and things to look into. So I hope it's useful.
I think you've put it amazingly there, like how learning really does need to be intergenerational, because every mentor mentee relationship I've seen is really the mentee just questioning the mentor and learning from them. And I've never seen it the other way around where a mentor is actually younger than the mentee. It's always so. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said there, and I think that's something that would need to change in order for people to be able to improve their learning. But yeah, Jordan, I love what you're doing at Capstone. I think it's amazing. As somebody who was at school, never really got any experience, I think it's great to see people bringing experiential learning to students and helping people learn in a new way, not just regurgitate information. And yeah, thanks ever so much for coming on.
Hey, appreciate it. If I could be of any use to you or your audience, very easy to find on LinkedIn, or you can email me, jordan@capsource.io. And doing my best effort to keep inbox zero. So
Nice. Thank you, Jordan.
you take